WWE 2K17 has been one of the most anticipated wrestling games I can think of in recent history, mostly due to backstage fighting and the fact that the last game was such a huge improvement over the one before that. But does it really deliver, or is this yet another game in the series that leaves us wishing they would have done a little more? Let's find out. This is WWE 2K17 for the Xbox One. At first glance, it would appear that things have changed quite a bit, as you are greeted by a main menu that's quite different from games of the past. Everything has this smoke theme to it, with the inclusion of in-game models of the wrestlers walking and taunting in the background, which is pretty cool to see. This year, they pushed the envelope once again with the amount of wrestlers featured, with over 130 right off the bat. Well, for the most part, pretty much anybody not on the active roster needs to be unlocked using in-game currency or by purchasing DLC. This game has dropped the digital photos of wrestlers at the selection screen and swapped them out for actual in-game models, something we haven't seen in quite some time. Not only did they manage to make it look good, but created wrestlers no longer stick out like a sore thumb. If you pre-ordered the game, you can wrestle as Goldberg, with two attires featured representing his time in both WCW and WWE. As you probably already know, any game that features either Scott Hall or his persona Razor Ramon automatically earns a lot of points with me, and this game features both. It's hard to complain about a roster this vast, but there are a few minor problems. Last year, the Road Dogg wasn't included. This year, X-Pac didn't make the cut, which once again deprives us of a full DX roster. Also, some of these character models have been recycled for a few years now, but to be fair, that's mainly isolated to the game's legends. Again, things like this are really minor, not to mention with the create modes as advanced as they are these days, you can create for yourself or download a created version of pretty much anybody you can think of. This is also the first game in quite some time to feature Vince, Shane, and Stephanie McMahon as playable characters. On top of this, plenty of DLC is on the way, with wrestlers including the likes of Austin Aries, Brutus Beefcake, Eddie Guerrero, Psycho Sid, Luke Gallows, Carl Anderson, and many more. Overall, this is one hell of a roster, and other than a few minor complaints, I'm extremely satisfied. Since the game was mostly developed before the brand split, the new arenas for Raw and SmackDown Live did not make it into the game, which automatically dates things a bit. The pay-per-view arenas present are mostly based on those used in 2015, with a few from 2016. New for this year is the ability to pick a time of day after selecting an outdoor arena, which may seem like a small detail, but it's little things like this that really give us a better feeling of control. The biggest disappointment is the drop in classic arenas that we saw from last year. Some of them return, like Clash of the Champions, Bash at the Beach, the classic Raw is War, and a few others, but there still isn't that selection that we got last year. Now, I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised by the new Halloween Havoc arena. When I first saw that it would be a pre-order bonus, I thought they were simply going to recycle the Halloween Havoc 1996 arena from last year, and while they did still include that arena into the game, this one is from the 1998 pay-per-view, which is one of my favorite wrestling stages of all time. Another bonus for us WCW junkies is the inclusion of the Nitro Arena, and in my opinion it's the best looking version I've seen, though I wish they would have removed the ringside tables to make it a little more true to real life. There are also a few arenas on the way in the form of DLC, including SmackDown 2000, Armageddon 1999, and one that I'm really looking forward to, WCW Saturday Night 1992. Overall, there are a few less arenas this time around, but it still can't be overshadowed by the fact that two of my favorite WCW stages of all time made the cut. Thanks to some lighting improvements and other slight graphical upgrades, entrances look even better this year, despite many animations being recycled. The ones that were reanimated are a welcome addition and for the most part look fantastic. One thing that still hasn't been fixed for some reason is the aspect ratios of certain Titantron videos. While most of them display in widescreen, utilizing the entire Titantron, there are still some occasional videos that display in 4:3, causing black bars on both sides of the video. I find it hard to believe that this can't be fixed, and it just kind of comes across as a bit lazy in my opinion. One thing that caught me off guard was the fact that after many years of screwing up the entrance for Classic Kane, they finally got the timing of the pyro right. Though they've worked on improving fog and smoke effects, as seen in the game's menus, the pyro still appears a little out of place at times, often looking like it was plucked straight out of a PS2 title. While I truly don't believe they'll ever get every single entrance spot on perfect, they're definitely heading into the right direction. At first glance, there hasn't been a whole lot of change when it comes to the basic gameplay engine. The button layout remains the same, finishers are still performed as they were last year, we still have OMG moments, but as you dive deeper into the match, you'll notice a few differences. There's a new rollout mechanic featured in matches consisting of more than 2 wrestlers. This system allows a player to recover from fatigue by rolling out of the ring and taking a breather. The longer a player waits, the more he or she can recover and regain stamina. This helps these type of matches feel much more realistic, as where before battles would just become endless spamming of attacks. But this definitely takes us even further away from that arcade feel that the franchise once had. THQ added a few thousand new animations to the game, including all new moves, transitional animations, reanimated moves, and taunts. For years now, taunts have helped a player gain momentum, which leads to signatures and finishers, but now they can aid in other aspects of a match. For example, taunting with the right button on the D-pad will increase your damage and grapple ability for a short period of time. Pressing left will enable a small amount of time where momentum can be easily earned. Taunts can also now be performed in many different areas of the ring, including the middle and top ropes of the turnbuckle. This now gives us a whole new strategic approach to the taunt system that we've never seen before. Though the not-so-popular cat and mouse submission system from last year does return here as the default for 2K17, there is an alternative system that can be used. With this option enabled, a player will have to mash the corresponding button when applying a submission in order to fill the meter and make your opponent submit. The same will need to be done on the receiving end of a submission in order to avoid tapping. Just make sure to pay attention to what button it prompts you to press, because this minigame can end quite quickly with your wrestler tapping out if you're not fast to respond. I can say without a doubt that I definitely prefer this new submission system over last year's. The targeting system has also been changed back to a manual one featuring a simple click of the right analog stick, making it a lot easier to target your desired enemy. It's clear that they definitely listened to our complaints from last year. Taking the match outside of the ring will result in a camera angle similar to what we saw in SmackDown vs. Raw 2009. And just like in that game, while this angle looks nice and helps bring the action in closer, it can become a bit disorienting at times, especially when attempting Irish whips into certain directions. And speaking of camera angles, this year when wrestlers move too far apart on screen, the game now displays a split screen mode instead of just constantly zooming out until the wrestlers look like ants. This is also featured in the backstage match, where it becomes a lot more necessary as wrestlers can enter different rooms independently. The commentary has been so-so for many years now, but there comes a point where it just seems inexcusable. When Charlotte and Sasha Banks are wrestling and JBL shouts out, "He won't lose, there's too much fight left in him." Well, then you know there's a problem. Or during the career or universe mode when Michael Cole welcomes you to Raw twice. I know there's a lot more dialogue to keep track of these days, which makes things a bit harder to work with, but it just seems like these issues should have been fixed before the game's release. If you're wondering what those stars are at the top left of the screen, well, that's the new match rating system. The whole point is to entertain the fans as best as possible, which leads to earning more stars. The ideal rating here would be 5 stars, which might be a little tougher to pull off than you think. You'll need to have a nice mixture of move variety, taunts, close falls, top rope moves, and just about anything else you can think of that would make a match exciting. The post-match festivities also received a bit of an upgrade. Not only are there a lot of new winning animations that look more like a WWE presentation, but the breakout feature that was introduced last year during entrances can now be used after a match as well. So say you've won the match, your player is beaten, you're taunting in the ring, and you get the urge to stop what you're doing, pick your opponent back up, and F5 him again. Well, you can, and all of this flows surprisingly well. Managers have been a part of the franchise for quite some time, but we've also been limited to one per player or team. This year you can choose up to 3 managers to accompany your wrestler to the ring. These managers will come to your aid, often interfering in the match, doing things like distracting the ref during a pinfall or helping your wrestler off the floor after being thrown out of the ring. I'd say the overall visual presentation, just like last year, is a mixed bag. I mentioned the lighting improvements, which is a nice touch, but many wrestlers still look a bit bizarre. Guys like John Cena look pretty much dead on, while other wrestlers are not quite as accurate. Luckily, while graphics are important, they're not really a deal breaker for me. One of the biggest selling points this year is the return of the backstage match, something we haven't seen for a few years, which is pretty inexcusable in my opinion, but hey, let's celebrate it because damn it, it's back. Not only can you select this match type outright, throwing you right into the back halls of a WWE event, but you can also access the backstage area during a Falls Count Anywhere match by traveling up the ramp and walking straight through that curtain. Once backstage, you can move from one space to another. Areas like the gorilla position, the interview area, and even Triple H's office can be explored, each with their own weapons and special areas that can be used for unique attacks like OMG moments. And holy crap, I can actually pick up this TV and beat my opponent with it. I can honestly say this match type has been a long time coming. We now also have the ability to fight in the crowd, which can be entered by going over the barrier or walking in through the stage area. There's even a little section with a few weapons, including a table where players can battle it out amongst the WWE universe. This isn't the same level of freedom we experienced with the SmackDown series of old, but it's a step in the right direction. The ladder controls and physics have been overhauled this year. Ladders can now only be placed in specific locations in the ring, 5 to be exact, in front of each set of ropes or in the center of the ring. If you attempt to place it elsewhere, the game will simply set up the ladder in the closest one of these locations to where your wrestler is positioned. This is nice as you no longer have to worry about perfectly positioning the ladder in the center of the ring, but it also takes a bit of freedom away from us. On the outside, ladders can now be placed between the ring apron and barrier, which can lead to some pretty awesome moments. As far as how the object above the ring is retrieved, well, that's where things become a little tedious. The system involves a small ball rotating around a circle with a small opening in it. This ball needs to be dropped into the small opening, which, as you can imagine, can be a little bit difficult while you're in a time crunch. This has to be done a total of 8 times before the match can be won. Luckily, each participant's attempt at this system will count towards the game, meaning if your opponent managed to get 7 successful attempts under his belt, you could swoop in and get the final one, resulting in the win. This is another one of those minigame systems that I'm just not very good at, which leads me to becoming frustrated. The cage match, on the other hand, features a control mechanic that is easy enough to use but still requires a bit of strategy. And that can be said about most of the game's match types, many which haven't changed much since last year's installment. The biggest letdown this year, other than the P. Diddy-inspired soundtrack, is the lack of showcase mode. I know some people are fine that this mode didn't return, but many of us enjoy the immense amount of nostalgia that this mode offers. I, for one, very much like reliving history, adding my own flair to the matches as I progress through a superstar's career. I can only hope that they bring this feature back next year. Career mode does return, and if I'm being completely honest, I have to admit it's very similar to what we saw last year. You'll start off getting some words of advice from Lord Prince Albert, or A-Train, Matt Bloom? Whatever the hell people call him these days, he teaches you the ropes. You'll get called up to the main roster where you'll focus on building rivalries, making allies, and chasing championships. And just like last year, your main focus is the WWE Hall of Fame. One of the new features here is the new promo system. This is where you're given the power to select your own dialogue, and what you select will affect the way the crowd reacts. For example, if you're a heel, you probably shouldn't be praising the crowd, and if you do, it will affect the overall rating of your promo. This is a nice addition to the series, but it feels like it could use a little refining, and with a serious lack of any voice acting, it just seems a bit primitive. Overall, this career mode feels a bit bare, but regardless, there's definitely some good entertainment value here. I also experienced a few bugs during the career mode, including the game going straight from my wrestler's entrance to the end of the match. Actually, bugs have been a problem with the game since its release. Many people have complained about becoming stuck in walls during backstage matches or wrestlers morphing around the ring. I myself have experienced a few bugs of my own in the few weeks that I've been playing the game. Watching Bret Hart clip into the ring apron and then appear standing in the ring the next second is definitely humorous, but also a bit disappointing. Universe mode is like a simulation experience in a way where you can play out the events of your favorite weekly shows and pay-per-views. Only here you have complete control, from the rosters to the titles that wrestlers will contend for, and you can even perform brand splits if you'd like. The new promo feature carries over as a big part of Universe mode this year as well. The only real downside is the same one that plagues the career mode, and that's the lack of voice acting. Regardless, there really is a lot to do here, and most diehard fans will most likely spend a lot of their time here. The loading times are a bit of a problem here, especially when dealing with anything created. God forbid I feel like facing 4 created wrestlers against each other in a created arena. Might as well put the controller down and go make myself some lunch while I wait. Seriously, it's ridiculously long. I stared at this loading screen for almost 3 minutes. But on a positive note, the download times in the community creations have been drastically cut down, which is nice. And speaking of creations, this game shouldn't disappoint even the most dedicated creators out there. The Create a Wrestler mode features more little options than ever. Stuff I wouldn't have even expected, like the ability to select from different veins that you want popping out of your wrestler's arms. The ability to edit any WWE wrestler also returns, which is great for those of us that like to create alternate attires, but this year they added a feature in which you can dye the hair of a wrestler. This works like a paint tool you would see on a program like Photoshop. It takes quite some time to recolor an entire head of hair, but regardless, it's quite the feature. Unfortunately, it doesn't work on facial hair or eyebrows. The Create an Entrance offers even more options than before, like the ability to combine multiple options for things like lighting effects and pyro. Sadly, custom music is still not an option, but thankfully they loaded up on the generic music selection, and while it's not great, I'm just glad something new is there for us. Along with the returning abilities to create movesets, shows, and championships, we get a few new modes. The first being Create a Video. This is something we've seen before, and honestly I don't know why it left. I mean, why have we been stuck using WWE Superstars Titantron videos for the last few years? This year you can make your own. You can select from a vast variety of stock footage, ranging anywhere from cityscapes to abstract art and plenty in between. This mode features a video editor where you can slice and pair clips together, as well as add text, screen effects, and logos. I'm extremely happy about this addition. The Create a Victory is also new, though it's not a creation feature as much as it's simply a victory selection screen. Either way, it's another one of those little things that was featured years ago and for some reason taken away. Now, we no longer have to watch a powerhouse, scary, emotionless wrestler celebrate their 30-second squash match like they just won the Royal Rumble. Another very necessary addition. Despite lacking a few things that I really wanted, like the showcase mode and voiceovers, I can still say without a doubt that they've managed to make improvements over 2K16. The gameplay just feels so smooth, and the return of the backstage match as well as crowd fighting just feels so right. Sure, the graphics can be hit or miss and the bugs are inexcusable this far into the franchise, but despite the few shortcomings, there's a pretty good game to be had here, and I would highly recommend it to any wrestling game fan.